Hey, how you doing?
Yo, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
Hey, not too bad, not too bad. So you're a Christian?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. And how long have you been a Christian for?
I've been a Christian my entire life.
Okay, awesome. Are you like do you just subscribe to a certain kind of denomination, Catholic, Protestant, Baptist, anything like that?
Uh, Protestant.
Protestant, so just a non-denominational Protestant?
Yeah.
Okay, I got you, I got you. And what on the background would you like to talk about?
I'd like to talk about the third topic.
The third one?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What are your thoughts on that?
So I feel like Christians cannot be pro choice because I'm pretty sure it's Psalm 39 that says that we were knitted together in our mother's womb. So like life begins at conception. So we're already a person at conception. So if you're pro-choice, then you're supporting that life being taken away.
Do you think that it's unlike the biblical God to take life away, even from children?
Uh, yeah, I think it's wrong to purposely uh take away a life of a human being.
Yeah, I can agree with you there. So maybe to clarify things, let me give my side of this. I think that it's a little bit contradictory, or at the very least, I don't understand how a Christian or how someone can be Christian but not pro-choice simply because if you are a Christian that believes in free will, and I understand I'm not a Christian, I'm an atheist, but when I read the Bible, I think that it very clearly does not allow for free will. But I know that lots of Christians take the account that yes, it does. So if you're a Christian that thinks that free will is a gift from God, then I think that the appropriate action would be to warn against abortion, but do nothing to prevent the free choice of another individual from doing what they will, because in the end they are judged by God and they answer to God for that. And the fetus, if aborted, just goes straight to heaven. So, at the very least, if there is the abhorrent loss of a child, that child goes to heaven, and that person has done something of their own free will, gifted by God, that they will then answer for. The only thing that you, as a Christian or a Bible believer, should do is to warn them, but not do anything to stop them. So no legislative, no type of physical protest or blockage of any kind. Just simply like just try to talk to them and say, hey, if you don't listen to me, you don't listen to me. But I did what I could do. I don't think that there should be any kind of actual active prevention of it. And then I also, and my other 2 points, I'm sorry, will be a lot quicker. The other point is, I think we can point to many points in the Bible where God gave orders to unalive children, infants, and even did so himself. So clearly, this God doesn't really care for the value of children just because they're children. He has no problem offing children. So I don't think that it's fair, or at the very least consistent, to say that, well, abortion is wrong because my God would be against this slaughter of innocent children, when we see many instances where he is okay with it, even orders it and does it himself. And then my last point is, we see chapters and verses like passages like Numbers 5, where we see that it pretty much is an abortion ritual done if adultery is suspected. So at the very least, you could say, from a biblical standpoint, abortion is justified if it's in the case of adultery or an affair. So I think for these reasons, it would be very difficult for a Christian to be consistent and say that they are against abortion, or at the very least, one's ability to make the choice for themselves for abortion. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you at least see where I'm coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Okay, so what are your thoughts?
I mean, I can't really like say anything against that because like it is true, but I'm just like not really sure.
Okay, that's valid. So, you do you think that we just have some more things to think about on this topic then? Are you there, Jacob? All right, Jacob. Well, I hope that I gave you some things to think about with my position on why I don't think one can be Christian but not pro-choice. I don't know if you went away or if something happened. If you want to send in another request, feel free, and we can pick up the conversation again. All right. Let's see. So I will do my best to. I'm not quite sure who is here next. My apologies. I'm pretty sure I saw this profile beforehand, so we'll go here. Hey, how you doing?
Honey, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Glad. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. What on the background would you like to talk about?
I'm fine continuing topic number three. And I think you're conducting yourself very respectfully, and you're bringing up valid points that a Christian would have to address when it comes to how they maintain their stance. Um,
Thank you.
so
Were you here to hear the full reasons, the 3 points of
yeah,
why I'm unsure how someone could say they're a Christian but consistent that they're against abortion.
yep. If I remember correctly, one was this idea of God gifting free will and Christians being in a position to kind of prescriptively say this or that is right or wrong. But you would say that there's no basis to actually take action against these things. The second would be the idea that God demonstrates actions that take life or have made commands that take life. And then finally, this idea of verses like Numbers 5, Exodus 21, things like that, where it would appear that there is some like biblical basis where abortion is mandated or in some form condoned. Did I understand your or your 3 points misrepresent them at all?
You did almost fantastic. Actually, I'm honestly very impressed. The last one I didn't. The passage I brought up was specifically in Numbers 5, but yeah, no, everything else
Yes. Yeah.
spot on. Great.
The bitter water. Yeah. That.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
perfect. So
So
what are your thoughts on these points that I brought up?
sure. So obviously within Christianity, there's a lot of diversity when it comes to doctrinal beliefs, right? You have people that are full on determinists that believe that every single thing is determined by God. You have others that take a stance of kind of the clockmaker who wound up things and let it tick. So he's not necessarily the one controlling it, but can control kind of an idea. So with that to be said, I do, for those listening, want to state I don't necessarily represent all of Christianity. There are plenty that claim Christianity that I think are very wrong. And just like with any stance, there are people that represent it poorly or just haven't, put enough thought into these. So the first would be this idea of free will was the first point that you mentioned. So whenever I think of free will, at least in the framework that I understand it, free will isn't necessarily a gift from God in as much as it is a part of us being created in his image. Whenever God created us in his image under my worldview, to meet that qualification of in his image, there are certain attributes that we as humans now have as a part of our nature. Creativity, relational being, and free will. Whenever I think of how I would hold or substantiate, like objective morality, I would say God doesn't choose what is right or wrong. What is right or wrong is determined in a comparison to God in His nature. So it's not dependent on a mind. It is the actual standard that is just that is just comparative in nature. And so, us having free will doesn't justify actions. Us having free will holds us responsible to our actions because God, in having free will, remains perfect. Us, in having free will, do not. So I would say free will in and of itself doesn't justify actions per se. Um, Does that make sense? I don't want to, go too long. I'm not trying to preach here. I'm just trying to
No,
lay a firm foundation to that.
yeah, sure. So would you are you agreeing with me that free will wouldn't justify the action portion?
Yeah, I would say free will, in my stance, is why you can be morally wrong about something because you have free will. If you did not have free will, then you are not a moral agent anymore.
Okay,
So the next question is, okay, so everybody has free will. Some people use it to do right things, some people use it to do wrong things,
but
and some people
do you
don't
think that
utilize it.
Christians should be using their free will to try to prohibit someone else's free will, even if
So
it's something
that's
as
yes.
abhorrent
So that's
as having an abortion from a Christian perspective? Shouldn't a Christian warn as much as possible and offer any other option to the person that wants the abortion, but in the ultimate end, be willing to say that if that person so chooses of their own free will that God created them with, that they are going to go through that child is going to find its way to heaven, and God will judge that person according to that person's heart when judgment day comes.
right.
Should
So
that not be the Christian
that's the
position?
right. So that's the immediate next conclusion, right? Is like, okay, so everybody has free will. Can that free will be infringed upon, whether by action, passivity, or like secondary causation, right? So, like, can I restrict you by voting for what I believe in? Is that
Yeah.
wrong? Can I restrict you by, if I see somebody stealing somebody else's purse, am I obligated to step in the way and trip them, or is it because of the fact that they have free will that I'm not? And I guess yell, you shouldn't do that, right? How do we determine that? And so I think that there's a few things in Scripture that lead to the conclusion. Obviously, with the presupposition that Scripture is the authoritative uh, author of morality for a Christian, that would imply that we are morally obligated to take action in so much as within our means. One instance, right, when it comes to just why even say anything at all would be something like Ephesians 5, where it talks about how we are, as Christians, obligated to expose the works of darkness, right? So it's not a passivity of just accept them, but we are supposed to take an active role in speaking against them. Now we also have passages like Second Timothy, I think it's Second Timothy 2:24, where it talks about how we're supposed to confront opposition with gentleness and with humility. But it doesn't say that we shouldn't confront. So whenever it comes to something as simple as just like, well, why speak up at all? People have free will. I would say very easy biblical founding for why get involved. Now, the next question is can that involvement actually be a restricting force? And I think that when it comes to your view on humanity, right? So for me personally, and this might, give you a little chuckle, I don't believe in atheists according to my worldview. I believe that for me to maintain consistency with Scripture, God is God of all, Lord of all, whether you accept his lordship or not. And then that means that there are two categories: those who submit to that lordship or those that rebel against it.
Well,
Um,
I don't know how that cancels out atheists though, because I agree with you. If your God is real, then your God is God of all, Lord of all, whether I recognize that God is real or not. But just because, but that's a completely different thing than whether I recognize that God is real or not.
right.
Me
So the
me saying
second
that I do not believe in any gods means that I am an atheist. It doesn't matter if God is real and does rule over me. If that's the fact of things, that's the fact of things. But as far as what an atheist is, it is dependent on what I myself as the individual perceive as far as the God question.
Right. Well, so the second premise to that statement of I don't believe in atheists would be so once we establish God is God of all, we have to adhere to Scripture. So according to Scripture, it says that no man has excuse, on that creation testifies of its creator. So with these two principles at play, if I were to truly believe what the Bible says, then that means that anyone who would hold atheism would fall into the category of what the Bible calls willing ignorance, of saying, I don't believe in this, even though according to Scripture, they do. They are denying the master that bought them, etc., and so on. So again, to maintain consistency with Scripture, I would have to say that every atheist is in denial of the truth, not just that they don't see the truth.
Yeah, I understand that from your perspective, and I think that that's
Yeah.
what makes it very hard from someone from my perspective that used to be a Christian and then found themselves not being a Christian. It's realizing such a huge, obvious flaw in the Bible, something the Bible is clearly wrong about. You know, train up the child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. I departed from it. You know, when it talks about those that you know gave everything to God and you know followed Romans what is it Romans 10 9 through 13 and followed the path to salvation, and then
Mm.
suddenly find themselves saying I'm not sure if God's real, and I'm not going to lie about that and say that I believe God's real when I'm not sure.
Mhm.
So so when we hear things like oh you know no one is without excuse, you know that God is real and stuff like that, I understand you believe that, but I hope you understand that I know for a fact that that's incorrect because I know that I truly don't know that. I don't know if God
Well,
is
and
real or not. And
yeah,
if you believe the opposite, that's fine. But
sure.
I can't make you change your mind of that because I can't put you in my own brain and I can't let you see
Right,
this
and
perspective.
and I
But
totally
if I
understand that.
could,
Yeah.
but if I could, you would see that that's wrong, and you would see how that is one of the huge, blaring flaws that this supposed perfect book has in it. Is that very clearly it's wrong.
Well, have you interacted much with like like presuppositional apologetics or like the tagged line of logic when it comes to
Here and there, not
yeah,
too much. It's something that I'm starting to start my study in.
sure.
I'm not going to say that I'm in any way like an expert or knowledgeable about it.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
have some notes about
me
it
me
in my
either. Yeah,
notebook,
me
but
either. Yeah, I mean, but from the base stance of it, right? Or at least the way that I would articulate it, interacting, whenever the topic itself is atheism or theism, right? Because obviously, simply proving theism doesn't prove Christianity at its base level. Um, but I would say that to operate functionally that you have objective knowledge, even if you would conceptually say, oh, well, I could be wrong about everything. I could be a simulation. Even with an assent to that potential, if you operate with a function of objective knowledge, I would argue that you are operating under a acknowledgement of deity. And,
oh,
and the
I'm
way
so
that I would
sorry.
say that,
Hold on one moment.
go
I
ahead.
think my roommate's trying to get my attention. One second.
And today's episode is sponsored by uh, menopause, putting the man back in menopause. If you or a loved one that you know has been diagnosed with ignorance, get a book.
My apologies. I've got some ribs roasting in the oven, and I
Ooh, nice.
he's just making sure I didn't like oversleep my time or anything. So because
Here we
I
go.
work nights, so my bedtime's kind of soon. So he was just making sure I didn't sleep with it on still. But yeah, I got
Yeah, rock
some
on.
barbecue ribs in there. I'm very excited taking them to work.
That sounds
It's gonna be
awesome, man.
fantastic. Anyway, I'm so sorry to
Um,
interrupt you.
no worries.
Where were you again?
Yeah, so all I had said was, even if you were to, as an atheist, assent or like acknowledge that you could potentially be a simulation and just wrong about everything you know, if you function operationally as having some form of objective knowledge, right? Not objective morality, but just objective knowledge, I would say that you are functioning under uh, acknowledgement of deity to some form, and the way that that's kind of fleshed out is this idea of the need for verification being a part of what truth is, right? So if I ask you, are we chatting on TikTok, and you say yes, I can say, well, how do you know that? You can say, well, I looked at the app and it says TikTok. And I'd say, okay, well, how do you trust your eyes? Well, my optometrist says my eyes are good. And I say, well, how do you trust your optometrist? And it becomes this endless cycle of verification of information for even a simple fact to be proven as true or false, and without an endpoint to ground knowledge, it's an infinite need for verification, which means no knowledge becomes absolute, no knowledge becomes certain. And so if you operate under a certainty to knowledge, then you are operating with some level of assent to a base to that knowledge or a foundation to that knowledge. I would say that you are left with either you being the source of all knowledge, which I think is, we can all agree, like no individual knows all things as humans, or you fall into this total form of relativism, right? In which case, a lot of people who get to that extreme end up, self-deleting and a whole bunch of other things because like reality itself starts to unravel in their mind. Or you are assenting to there being a source of all knowledge or a grounding of all knowledge, that has granted us access to it. And if there's a fourth option, I'm more than willing to hear. But I would say if you operate functionally with objective knowledge, then you operate functionally under a theistic functionality.
Yeah, sure. So for me, like I said, I'm still learning all these like philosophical terms and like trying to dive deep in that stuff. I would say that right now, and my position could definitely change in the future the deeper I study into this. So, what I say now, come back to me in 6 months, I might have a different answer.
Sure.
But for what I'm saying now is I don't know. I have no issue saying that that there is no objective truth that I can per se validate.
Well,
I
again, that's why I distinguished assenting to versus functioning with. So you can assent to this concept or acknowledge this concept that, you know what, maybe there isn't objective truth. But if you still function as though there is, my only point is that you are functioning under a theistic functionality. You still
I don't know
function as
how
if,
that's theistic because
well, yeah,
for me and at least for my terms at least when I say theistic
mhm.
I'm talking about the dependency of a god in that worldview. I don't understand how doing so does that. It's just simply me saying these things have been shown to repeatedly work, and so therefore I'm going to continue on as if they're going to do so until that changes. I don't see how
Yeah,
that requires any type of theistic view at all.
right. So like I said, if objective truth is an evidence for there being a source of truth, um, you would have to, like we said, fall on one side or the other. Either you have all the knowledge, you have none of the knowledge, or you have access to the knowledge. Um, and that
I
knowledge,
feel
or
like it's I don't know. It might be between the second and third option.
yeah, all that to say, this is a part of why I hold the stance of not believing in atheists. Right? Is this scriptural foundation of the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge is the verse in the Bible, and I would say that that
Mm-hmm.
is that is compatible with the outline that I just gave you. Having knowledge shows some form of acknowledgement to God. Um, but we've kind of
Yeah, I
veered
was
off
gonna
of
say
the topic.
we have kind of gone
Um,
off the topic.
yeah.
So
So
we
when it comes,
addressed point one. What about point
yeah,
two about the pro-choice, pro-life thing? God in the Bible has been seen to take the lives of innocent children, and so how can we
yes,
say that God values the life of the unborn and the life of innocent children when we can point to multiple examples where He ordered people to do it or He carried out the death penalty Himself on infants and children?
right. So I'm sure you're really familiar with, and I think there is a term for it, but when it's something is described from an individual perspective, even though that's not the functionality of that thing. So, like for instance, are you a flat earther?
No.
Okay, so you would believe in like the Earth rotates around the sun, correct?
Yes.
So when we talk about the sun rise and the sun sets, the sun itself isn't moving, but we're describing it from how it looks in our perspective, right?
Yes.
Okay, so if I give you $10 and I give Chip Jones in the comments $5, did I deprive him of $5 since I gave you 10, or did I take $5 from him?
No.
Right. So in the same way, if God is the source of life, when someone's life ends, that means that you can quantitate how much life was given to them. In our perspective, it looks like life is being taken. right? But functionally, if God only gave 30 minutes of life to you, and then God gave 10 years of life to someone else, to say that God took life from someone would just be factually not true, in the same way that I didn't take $5 from Chip Jones. I just didn't give him 10. Does that make sense?
I 100% agree with you, and I don't think that
So,
that's a proper analogy when we see the stories of what we see in the Bible. For example, like you said, if you give me 10 and you give Chip 5, that's not you
mhm.
depriving, him or stealing it away and stuff like that. But when I'm looking at the
It
Bible,
would be
but
if I was obligated to give him 10. If I
sure,
was obligated to give him 10
sure,
and I only gave him
but I
5, I
think you and I
deprived
both
him.
agree that God isn't obligated to give life, so we can kind of throw that out of here, you know?
Right. And so I would say,
All right,
because God is
so
not obligated to give life, we can't claim that he's depriving someone of it either.
my point that's not exactly my point. So what I'm saying is that I don't understand how when God is giving life to people and he says that
Hmm.
he values the life of innocence, the life of children, and all that stuff, it's a completely different thing than these children just died through natural means of some kind or through the choice of, their own things. If they decided to pet a lion, and they got eaten, that's a little different. We're talking about
Or like
God. We're
or like
talking about God
SIDS or
giving.
something. Yeah.
We're talking about God giving the command for people to go and slaughter them, take swords
Right.
and unalive them. So so
So
so to
yeah.
to
Yeah.
go to your example of the $10 and $5 thing, I agree with you. You did nothing wrong with giving me 10 and giving Chip 5. I would say you did something wrong though. If you gave me 10, you gave Chip 10, and then you took a baseball bat, took out his kneecaps, and took 5 back. So it's the action on the in between that matters. The action of God saying, I want you to go unalive these kids, or I'm going to take the action to go and unalive these kids when it was completely unnecessary, is the problem.
Right. So when we're looking at these situations, I think we can agree, like, there's two categories, right? There's the ones that we would say is like, having a miscarriage, or passing away peacefully, or SIDS syndrome in infants. Like, we would say all of those would be more analogous to this idea of, okay, you were only given $5. You would say you're
Yes.
fine with those. You're talking more about the instance of where an action is taken, and that is how the life ends, correct?
Yes, yes. I'm like I said, I understand if a child of their own free will decides to play where they're not supposed to and falls down the rock cliff. Horrible,
Hmm.
terrible. But I think that's 100% different than a child who wakes up one day and sees that the army of Israel is at their, camp running through with swords out to slaughter them because their God
Hmm.
told them to.
So, and this is not to try and mischaracterize or get a gotcha or anything like that, but under your worldview, because I obviously have an answer for this, and I'm not discrediting this, but under your worldview, why would harm be bad? Is it simply like a sympathy understanding of, I wouldn't want it, so I assume it's bad? Or how would you actually
No,
substantiate harm
I
is bad?
no, I view it as the ultimate negative. If it's unnecessary harm, it's the ultimate negative.
But what determines necessity, right? So, like, obviously, feeling pain after doing a workout, we would say, okay, no pain, no gain. Like, we understand that that pain is purposeful, but who gets to
That
determine what necessity is?
because whether the outcome is negative or positive.
To who, right? So, like, for instance, we would both agree, somebody who comes in and pew pews a school is a vile and disgusting
to
human.
to
Um,
the whole of the individual as well as the entire species, and that's where the issue comes because a lot of conflict comes with whether we're trying to benefit an individual versus the individual and the species.
okay, so you would say that if the species say it's beneficial, but the individual doesn't, is it disqualified? Like, which one is necessary and which one is
We
sufficient?
would have to go individual by situation and circumstance. I can't give like a blanket answer to that. You understand?
Well, whenever I ask, like, necessary versus sufficient, like, do those qualifiers make sense in what I'm trying to ask?
I do believe so. But does it make sense when I say that we would have to go through example by example? I do believe that the circumstances would change whether or not we would see the reason as necessary or not. So therefore, I think we would have to go through it example by example. Oh, okay. Sorry, you got a phone call. Anyway, everyone, thank you so much for being here. Everyone in the queue, I apologize for the wait, but I thank you so much for your patience. We'll try to get to you pretty soon. Um,
All right, I'm back. I'm so sorry. My wife was
yeah,
calling. We're having a guest over later for dinner, and she was asking about dinner.
no, I understand
Um,
completely. You're perfectly fine.
not ribs, but she makes this killer garlic pasta, and it's so
Oh
funny.
God,
The other like a few weeks back, we had a potluck at church, and she had the crock pot of that pasta in the floorboard, and took too hard of a turn. And it spilled all over the floor of the car,
no,
and
no.
there was a guy from our church who helped her clean it, and he made a comment about how good it smells, and he is the one coming over for dinner, so we're making it again. Um,
That's kind
but
of funny. Well, best of luck
yeah,
with your dinner hosting tonight.
yeah.
It sounds great. It sounds delicious. And let me tell you, there's one thing that I miss about being an active church member is those church potlucks and dinners. Oh,
Oh yeah.
so good.
It's almost enough to convince you, but not quite.
Almost enough. It's almost there. They say a way to a man's heart is through his stomach, and let me tell
Oh
you,
yeah,
like, oh,
God will use it too. He will. But whenever I'm asking you like the difference between necessary and sufficient, whenever we're talking about qualifiers, right, we don't necessarily have to work through every circumstance to determine what is necessary versus sufficient. So if one individual benefiting from it is sufficient to say that it is good, then the um, society deeming it right or wrong, or the species deeming it wrong, is no longer a necessary aspect because all it takes is one person. But if society disagrees with that individual and that individual's stance is disqualified, then the individual is no longer a sufficient clause, and society becomes the necessary and sufficient clause. Does that make sense?
yeah, I am tracking you, and I do want to
Yeah.
continue this, but I do want to get on to your answer for this because I want to move on to point three because I do have some other people in the queue, and I do have to get
Yeah,
off
for sure.
soonish because I have to go to work later tonight.
You got to get those, and you got
So
to get those ribs.
I got to get the ribs
So
ready
yeah,
because I'm
the
taking
short,
them
the
to a
short,
coworker, so it's important.
So the short, yeah,
But
the shortest answer that I can give in that regard is, because God is not obligated to sustain life. There would have to be some kind of substantiation for why God has to sustain comfort or a lack of pain. And I don't know that argument could be made fully, that God has an obligation to avoid our pain and suffering. Now, if
I'm not trying to
God
say that God has an obligation. I'm just saying that we can recognize that it is unjust if God creates innocent children and then says go and unalive them.
Well, again, so when we say unjust, we have to figure out what our standard of justice would be. If God gave
I
you,
my standard is
five,
that there was a way to go around this and it was unnecessary to go this route, yet God chose to do it. So it is
right?
unjust.
Well, so unnecessary. And this is where we have to understand like the three categories, right? Because there's just, unjust, and then a non-just action, right? So non-just just means that it doesn't have an implication of justice or not. We wouldn't say that it is some kind of lack of justice for me to choose Green Sox over Red Sox, just because even though it's an unnecessary choice, that doesn't determine whether it is a good or bad thing. And by implying this unjust taking of life, there's a moral implication of saying, why would it be bad for a human to do it, but not bad for God to do it? The answer is man is obligated to respect the life God has given. But God, as the giver of life, is not obligated to give more than he has.
But not
Um,
always. There are some children they're allowed to off. There's some people they're allowed to enslave. There's some people they're allowed to violate, and there's some people they're allowed to unalive.
Well, so again, if God is utilizing those people, then the people are a tool, not a actual not the decision maker, right? So God is the one who is choosing how he interacts with his creation. So again, whether you agree with it or not, obviously we come at this from different perspectives, but biblically, the reason why it is wrong for man to do it would be that humanity isn't owned by man. Humanity has an obligation to other humans as equal, and God has the authority to do with his creation and doesn't have that obligation to sustain life past what he has given or to sustain comfort past what he has given. Because like you and I hopefully would both agree, for instance, that if a child has cancer, um, it is not right to just take their life the moment that it is said that they had cancer. So we kind of acknowledge this idea that living and having cancer is better than simply being unalived. Um, there's an acknowledgement that even suffering isn't always going to be worse than passing away. But again, that would be
Yeah.
the answer to point two.
Okay.
And
And
so
what is your response to point three? Just so I can um, close up and we can get on
yep.
to the next guest. So you remember point three, or should I
Yeah,
go for it?
so point three was the passages in Scripture that look like they condone or actually give instruction to abortion. So this is going to
Very
come.
for a very specific reason. I don't want to say that
Yeah,
this is for abortion for every single case. I
right,
think that this text is very specifically clear that this has to do with affairs
right, and
and
so
children of affairs.
So I would say contextually, you can actually determine that this woman is not pregnant, and this is actually talking about a curse of infertility, which I'm sure you've probably heard, that explanation to this before.
Oh, I
Um,
agree. It's a curse of infertility. I believe that the woman will, if she were guilty, the result would be that she'd be barren. The only problem is that, and I'm not saying that the woman is 100% pregnant or not. I'm saying
well,
that
I think
what we know of
we can
biology, we know that it takes up to less than an hour to up to, I believe, 6 weeks, or I'm sorry, maybe 4 weeks for fertilization to actually happen. And when it happens, then it has to implant into the uterine wall. So we understand biologically how this works. This could happen anytime within the first monthish to just to a few hours. So my point is that if according to this passage, it simply says that if a man gets a spirit of jealousy, and so basically, if he just thinks his wife cheated on him, he can take her to the priest, and this ritual will be done. And if she's guilty, she'll become barren, and become infertile. And if she's not, then she'll be fine. The only problem is that the passage gives absolutely no indication of whether or not the woman will be pregnant or not. The only
I
thing
would
is
say that it does.
what we know of biology is that the woman could become pregnant an hour afterwards of doing this act if she was actually guilty, or weeks after the fact. But the issue is that the husband, at any point, it doesn't give a time for the husband to bring her forward to do
So
this ritual. So
right.
if she were pregnant and did this ritual and was found guilty and became barren because of that, that would cause a miscarriage, and that would be an abortion because of an adulteress, or because of a fetus born out of adultery.
So a couple of points that you've brought up, and I'm no longer in teleportation, so I can turn my camera on now, and I won't get flagged.
No, you're good.
Um,
You're good.
so
By
so
the
a
way,
number of
I
things.
love the hat. I'm looking for a good hat of my own, so
Mhm.
I admire it. So go ahead.
I appreciate it. So a couple of things that you brought up. One is that you said that there's no temporal like restriction on when this is done. I would actually argue that there is, right? So the first
Sure. Do
qualification,
you know roughly where in the scripture it says that?
right? So in this passage, what it says, it actually qualifies that it is undetectable that she has defiled herself. So if we're working under this assumption of pregnancy, there would be a point in time where that is a visible thing. right? So it would be detectable. So we're having to say that this is before the point of a pregnancy being visibly detectable.
Yeah, but that's just visibly. We understand that just because we can visibly see it does not mean that weeks prior hand she wasn't actually pregnant. We know she was. We just couldn't see it yet. We couldn't see
Right,
the
right.
visible evidence of it yet.
So
So,
all I'm saying is
but
that this does say that
but
if she's
if the
visibly
ritual was
pregnant,
done in that time period where she was pregnant, but we couldn't visibly see her stomach, getting bigger, that doesn't mean that if the ritual was carried out and she became barren, that would still cause a miscarriage.
and that's where I would point us to the ending of how this passage works, right? So whenever you study scripture, and as you can tell, like I'm a Bible nerd, right? I like to read it out of the original Greek and Hebrew. I use cross contextual comparison. I like the Bible. I like studying the Bible. And whenever you study old text just in general, you have to work under a certain set of rules on how to understand what is being said. And one of the biggest and the most useful tools for that is when contract things are being contrasted to each other. If you don't understand premise one, but is being contrasted to premise two, the more you understand premise two, the better you understand premise one. Um, so, for instance, when in verse 28 it says, "But if the woman has not defiled herself and is clean, then she shall be able to conceive children," which means that she is at a point where she has not yet, and the determining factor of whether she can or can't conceive is her innocence or guilt. So that verse alone shows that this circumstance only applies, or would only, the curse itself would only determine whether she is able to conceive or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Would you take this to mean that it's not dependent on the husband's jealousy per se, but it is dependent on whether or not there's a certain amount of time from the accusation to when the ritual's being done?
So, as a Christian, I would say that it would depend. Fully the way that this functionally works, right, is the husband can be jealous and wrong. His jealousy doesn't determine whether or not she was unfaithful. So the way that this passage is to be understood by a Christian, or the way that it would have been understood back then, is if a husband is jealous but doesn't have any like basis to determine whether he should or shouldn't be, this would be the test that is administered. If the woman is guilty, she will become barren. She won't be able to conceive. If she is not guilty, she will be able to conceive. So her ability to conceive, her fertility would be the evidence of her innocence or guilt as understood by this passage. So in no way is this saying that if she was pregnant and guilty, she would miscarry. Because what is being at risk here is her ability to conceive.
Okay, and real quick, I wanted to apologize. I was incorrect about the weeks. It's within the first 45 minutes to 6 days that a woman can
Mhm.
conceive, not weeks. So you're saying that because of this verse, it has to be within the first 6 days that the husband has to get jealous and bring her forward?
Well, no, because again, his jealousy could be at any point. So again, we have to understand that this passage is exclusive to women that have not conceived, because what is at stake here is the ability to
What do
conceive
you
or not.
think that happens if she has conceived and her husband gets a spirit of jealousy?
Right. So there is nothing in here that would lead me to, especially with the understanding of like how limited the Hebrew was when it came to conceptualizing like abortion versus miscarriage, et cetera, and so on, right? I mean, whenever you think of what they would know of like a preterm miscarriage versus a simple menstrual cycle, they're going to be relatively indistinguishable to them,
I think they
right?
could tell. There's a little bit difference of like the tissue that's in there, and the shape of the tissue, the density of the tissue. It's not like your average period that a miscarriage is. It's a completely more heightened and more intense experience, as well as the discharge is not quite the same as your regular period.
Well, I
So
agree that there are observable
I wouldn't
differences.
say I wouldn't say that a miscarriage and a period were pretty much the same thing back then. So how would they know?
No, well, so what I said specifically was a pre or an early term miscarriage, because obviously, like if you see a
Okay,
small
okay.
child come out, right,
So
but
we're
in
talking
an
about within
early
like the
term,
first like what 2 weeks or so.
Right. So I
I,
would
I,
say
I, I
that,
actually agree with you. There's a lot of quote unquote
yeah,
miscarriages that happen, and a lot of women don't even know because they
yeah,
happen as a
even
normal
today,
period. Yeah, no, I
even
100% agree
today,
with
yeah.
you.
And so what I would say is whenever it is referring to this idea of miscarriage or not, right?
By the
I
way,
would say,
thank you, Skits and Bits. I appreciate you and your likes and your shares. Um, sorry,
um,
Tano, go ahead.
no worries. Yeah. So the shortest answer, because I actually just got to, so I run a few restaurants. I got to one of my restaurants. I got to get in and help them with some stuff.
Oh gosh, here I am
Um,
talking about making ribs, and you're like, I own a restaurant. Like,
I don't own restaurants. I'm a district manager for Pizza Hut, so I've got 7 restaurants, kind of scattered across Houston.
okay, I got you. I
Um,
got you.
but the shortest answer is that this passage, as understood in the original language to the original audience with its intended purpose, would be known to be expressing not that an abortic procedure is approved in the instance of a infidelity, right? And that if she is guilty, then the curse will cause an abortion. The way that this would be understood is that if there is no evidence of infidelity, then God provides evidence by the woman's ability to conceive, moving past that point of accusation. When the curse is administered, I'm sorry, when the action is administered, it either becomes a curse of infertility or it doesn't based on her innocence. So this whole thing is saying if there is no proof, God will provide proof through her fertility. So in no way is this passage actually talking about an abortic procedure. It's talking about God providing proof of infidelity when there isn't one.
All right, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and answering these questions. I appreciate you and your time. I'm gonna let you go so you can get to your job. I'm gonna move on to the next
Yeah,
guest.
and
I
I'm
gave
gonna
you a
give you a follow.
follow. Yeah, I
Yeah,
gave you a follow.
exactly.
I greatly enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'll circle back at some other point, and because I have plenty to discuss on even the other topics on your list there.
yeah, I'd love to get
But
further in depth of even on this one and more on others. So,
yeah, so hopefully I was able to at least show that there is a sensible understanding of how to maintain being a Christian and not being pro-choice in the way that we would understand it today. Even if you disagree still, it doesn't require, ignorance to maintain compatibility between a abolitionist standpoint and a Christian standpoint.
yeah, no, it's okay, and I still do disagree, but I do want to, I hope we can get, into that more depth later on,
All
down the
right.
road. But again, my whole point is that even if we don't change each other's mind right now, I hope that at the very least you understand where I'm coming from, and that you feel that you've had enough time to, convey your point across, and hopefully feel understood. I feel like I understand your position pretty well too, and I thank you so much for your time and sharing it.
Absolutely. Have a good one, man.
You too, man. Take care. Man, what a great conversation. I enjoyed that so much. Um, 1 second. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Please tap the screen. Go ahead, share the live. Thank you, everyone who's been here. Everyone who's in the queue, I appreciate it. I believe Darth Dawkins is next. Give me one moment, though. I appreciate you and your patience. I just need to let my dogs out, and I need to brush the ribs. If you've been here for a bit, you know that I'm cooking ribs for the crew later tonight at work. So I just gotta brush the sauce on. Thank you all for being here. You know what? Whatever you think of Darth Dawkins, whatever I think of Dawkins, let's put it aside. He's been in the queue. He's been waiting. The least we can do is let him up and hear his position. So Darth, I'm gonna, you'll be the next guest I let up. But real quick, let me just let my dogs out real quick and let me brush the ribs, and I'll be back in just a moment. Thank you so much. I'll be right back. I want to thank everyone who's still here, who waited for me as I let my dogs outside and brush some sauce on the ribs. So, if you're here, you know that you know that you definitely want me as a boss because I stay up late to make you homemade ribs. I hope that the night crew appreciates. You know what? We work nights. We deserve something nice. So, homemade ribs? Hell yeah. Alright, let's get back to the guests. Hello, Darth. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Awesome.
You want
And
me to
you're a
each one of the
Christian,
four
correct?
questions? Yes,
Oh,
I am.
awesome. How long have you been a Christian?
40 years.
You said 20?
40.
40. Awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
let me switch my headset real quick. It'll just take me 10 seconds.
Yeah, no worries.
That's a
Take your
better
time.
mic.
Don't worry. Take your time. All right, let's give Darth a second. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Go ahead, tap the screen, share the live. If you are interested in these kind of conversations, go ahead and send in a request. If you know people that are interested in these kind of conversations, go ahead and send a live share to them. See if they'll join. Like I said, it's not my goal to change anyone's mind or deconvert anyone. I just like to share my perspective, what I believe and why, and I hope that other people will do the same, and that at the very least, even if we don't agree, we'll be able to understand where the other person is coming from.
Did you want me to answer each one of the four?
You can bring up whichever one strikes the most interest to you.
I'll just go through all four of them quickly. Is the
Sure.
Bible true? How do we know it? Yeah, the Bible is true, and we know that when the Bible is understood in terms of its propositional content as a unit, it reveals a self-authenticating worldview wherein the properties of God are exclusive and indispensable, and there couldn't be a rational worldview grounded without it. So the Bible, understood compositely in terms of its propositional content, is self-authenticating whether or not anyone accepts it, and the rational denial therein of that worldview is impossible. The Bible does not condone slavery as it is understood in the modern term. The word slavery, translated in the 20th century's translation, is the word ebed. It means to be a servant. It is a word that is entirely neutral. It is for example, in the King James Bible, never once is ebed translated as slave. So people are capitalizing on the unfortunate choice of 20th century translators to translate the word slave. There are too many passages in the Old Testament that contradict or would mitigate, arguing that Ebed means that God was sanctioning and approving kidnapping and forced servitude. How can one be a Christian but not pro-choice? Very simple. God commands us not to indiscriminately end lives. Okay, and that would include the unborn. LGBT, is it wrong? Any human activity that's inconsistent with God's general purposes in creation is wrong. And I'm done.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm taking notes. You said inconsistent with God's what?
Any human conduct that is inconsistent with God's general purposes in creation is wrong.
Purpose of creation. All right, yeah, sure. Let me just jump through these real quick. So you say self-authenticating worldview, and I think that for number one, I just want to ask: do you think that this is the one exception to where circular reasoning is acceptable, and if so, why? And then for two, you say that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. When you say self-authenticating worldview and whether or not we want to accept that, whatever, is this the only position ever that you take circular reasoning to be valid for, and if so, why? And then for the second point,
in order for anything to be true or valid, it's got to have an ultimate referent. No ultimate referent, and you don't have the capacity to rationally invoke that something is true or false. So the positive propositional representation within the Christian worldview, the Christian scriptures, revealing God's attribute set, that attribute set of the God of the Bible is exclusive and indispensable for all actuality, truth, reason, and intelligibility. If one refuses to accept that, one will not be able to rationally deny it, okay, which is a reductio ad absurdum. So when properly understood, the biblical worldview presents what is called a transcendental argument with a reductio ad absurdum. In other words, the positive representation of the Christian worldview presented as a transcendental argument cannot be rationally denied because it's a reductio ad absurdum. If you attempt to deny it, it would have to be true first in order for you to have the capacity in your model of reality to affirm or deny anything. So that's why it's self-authenticating.
So it's self-authenticating because you believe that it is necessary for me to have
No,
in order to combat it?
because the Bible represents a transcendental argument that entails a reductio ad absurdum. Okay? A transcendental argument is not the usual kind of argument. It simply is that
Let's pretend like I'm 10. So when you say that the transcendental argument is presented in the Bible, and to say otherwise would reduct you ad absurdum, you're saying that it would be ridiculous of me to say otherwise, correct?
it wouldn't even be ridiculous. It would be utterly irrational. You wouldn't have an identifiable, defensible model of reality because you have none.
Because the thing is, I see this to be a claim, and I don't understand why. If you're the one making the claim, then I feel like you're the one that needs to explain why. And simply saying because you can't do it,
Explain what
doesn't show
why.
I'm
making a positive representation of the Christian worldview. That positive propositional content presents itself as being self-attesting, and that the denial of something that is self-attesting ends in a reductio ad absurdum. Okay, so there are different ways to formulate the transcendental argument for God. One way of expressing it is the attribute set. Without the attribute set of the God of the Bible, actuality and intelligibility would be rationally impossible to ground. We do have rationality and actuality to ground. Therefore, the Christian God exists. Now, your objection will probably be premise one. But the attempted denial of premise one will result in a reductio ad absurdum, because in order to
I
deny
wouldn't
it,
say it's a quote-unquote denial. It would just be more and more of a question, being like, I don't understand why God is necessary for the knowledge.
You either have to accept it, and if you don't accept it, that's a de facto denial.
So even if I'm questioning it, I'm denying it?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't understand how if I'm denying it because you haven't explained it well enough for me to understand it, I don't understand how that's my fault.
If you do not accept that God is, and he has a perfect attribute set, and in these he has revealed himself.
I don't know what God is or God means, so I don't know what that means to accept that God is.
That's a claim that you don't know that, okay? And we could discuss that claim.
Well,
what I'm saying is if you
God?
refuse...
When you say God, what do you mean? Like, what is the definition for God?
Well, you don't know that God refers to the supreme being who's the creator of all things that are not himself?
Is that
what you mean by before? God? No, that's what
the problem is that... And
why do you keep on interrupting me in the midst of me answering you?
Well, you asked me a question and I wanted to answer it.
No, you keep on interrupting me in the midst of me answering you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, so in Western civilization, God refers to almost typically, without exception, as the supreme being, the eternal creator of all things that are not himself. Okay? So God is referring to the creator or the creator-creature distinction.
And that's how you are using it, correct?
That's how it's used in Western civilization.
Okay, but the problem is that I talk to different people from all over the world all the time, so I need to figure out what God means to you.
Yeah, well, I just explained to you that the word God in the context of what we're speaking is that the world represents
Why do
you keep on interrupting me?
I'm just trying to clarify things, and you're trying to make things unnecessary.
Yeah, saying clarification, machine gun interrupting me is not clarification.
I think I'm doing a pretty calm job of letting you speak, and I'm
No,
sorry
you
that
keep on interrupting me when I'm answering
I'm
it.
trying to ask clarifying questions, and I'm sorry
Yeah, and
that's
you're
too
also
much
in a
for
state
you.
of denial that you keep on interrupting me in the midst of my answering it. You can sit there and hide behind the verbiage, oh, I'm just trying for clarification, but that's just verbal camouflage for you to repeatedly interrupt me when I'm trying to
Do
answer
you
you.
not think that it's possible that I'm actually asking you for clarification?
You may be, but the point is, you're. That's a cover story for multiple interrupting me. The bottom line here is this:
so you've
you
already.
know, okay. I
It
gave
sounds
you the
like you're very
definition of God.
biasly making
I
a
gave you the
judgment against me.
definition of God. You will either accept that as a working
Thank you.
operational definition or not.
That's all I was asking. I was asking for your definition of what you meant by God.
Yeah. If you don't
That's it.
accept the creator-creature distinction, okay, that
I
God
don't.
is and that He's
don't
you're
think-
interrupting me again. Again, you're interrupting me again.
I'm sorry that I was trying to answer
Do
your
you have a
question.
compulsion to interrupt people? You see, I noticed that you did interrupt the other guy that you had up here, but you have a penchant for interrupting. And again, you're interrupting me before I
feel like the other people were able to have a very decent conversation back and forth.
And that's because you weren't.
I don't know why you're getting so angry. This is chill out, dude.
I'm not angry. I'm being assertive
Chill
that
out.
you keep on interrupting me.
It's all right. Just chill out. Take a breath. You and I will take.
No, I'm perfectly fine.
5 seconds. You and I together. 1, 2,
Now
3.
you're being
Both.
rude and
no,
antagonistic.
you and me. This is for you and me.
Which you were not due to the previous guest. Okay? I'm making one simple request. Please stop persistently interrupting me. Is that too hard for you to follow?
I'm so sorry that asking for clarification was too much. Go ahead.
Okay, again you're being deceitful.
Hey, I took my 5-second calm down. I'm sorry you didn't.
Me again. Is this a strategic move on your part? Okay, to end the conversation?
No, it's not.
Who
said anything about ending the conversation? You're the one bringing it up.
Not interrupting me?
Are you just trying to push some buttons so I end the conversation with you?
Are you capable of
not interrupting me? Are you capable of having a conversation?
I am capable. Are you capable of not interrupting me?
So let's agree. You and I will take 5 seconds. You and I will take 5 seconds of silence, and then you will go ahead and continue. And then we'll continue
let's
on.
see if you
Ready?
resume interrupting me
Let's start now. Ready? 1, 2, 3. 5 seconds.
Yeah. So I have presented you a positive case for the Christian worldview, where God's revelation of Himself in creation, as well as the propositional content through the prophets in Jesus Christ, propositionally secured in the Bible, that it represents a self-attesting message that the only possible rational world is one where God exists, God reveals Himself, and He has the attribute set of perfection, which only the Christian God has revealed in history. You will either accept that or you will not accept that. If you don't accept it, you're going to have to give rational grounds by virtue of whatever worldview you're operating from.
I'm so sorry. Is it okay for me to respond now? Can I speak?
Yeah, I've been silent for a while now.
Oh, fantastic. So, because you keep making claims and stacking claims on top of claims, I don't understand how any of that is my responsibility to prove.
Oh, I didn't say that. What I did was I presented a self-authenticating presentation, a positive representation that the world reveals God in natural revelation and through human history propositionally in the Bible of the only possible rational worldview. I gave a positive case for the Christian worldview. Now, you will either accept or not accept that positive presentation. So
yeah, I don't accept your argument because I don't accept that a circular argument of the Bible, God says so, therefore it is a valid argument. But I do want to thank you. But I do want to thank. Hold on, I'm not done. Don't interrupt me. Don't interrupt me. Hold on. Don't interrupt me.
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute. I couldn't ask clarifying questions, but you can.
You know what? You're an asshat.
Darth, please. Okay? I'm trying
so hard.
You were entirely
Darth, cordial.
I will let you speak. I will let you speak.
No, I'm going to
let me speak
because you've demonstrated. You're demonstrating.
Are you going to run away?
When you get serious opposition, you're going to be an asshat. No, I'm not running away.
Oh gosh, I wish just one of these Phil bros would even just pretend to engage me. Oh my god.
You're a fake and a phony because you were cordial.
How am I a fake and a phony when you're the one that's like, I'm gonna leave because you won't engage with me?
You've been rude and obnoxious to me the whole time. You're not
Actually, no,
taking my
that's been you,
complaint
man.
seriously. Yeah, you
Do,
have.
do
You're
you
not
think that
taking
if
my
I
things
have been cordial and
seriously.
nice to everyone except you, that maybe
No,
you are the
sir. The
problem?
point the point is this. What you're doing is you're not even being conversational with me. And in fact, every time you asked me a question and I started answering, you interrupted me almost every single time. Do you realize you did that?
I'm sorry, am I allowed to speak, sir? Hmm?
Okay. You know what? I'm done. I'm not
Yeah, I'm
running
sorry that
away.
you
I'm
aren't allowed to
fed.
have a
I'm fed up.
conversation.
I'm
I've tried
fed up
so
with
hard
your
to have this
deceitfulness. See, now
conversation,
you're
and
being
if you
rude.
had just
You're a
waited a
you know
moment,
what?
you
You're
would
a
have
fake,
heard
a
me
phony, and a
thanking you
fraud.
for your
Yeah.
time and
Bye.
you sharing
Bye.
your information
Yeah.
with
You're a
us.
fake. Goodbye.
Okay, fine. Go away, man. See if I care. Alright, so if he had waited 2 seconds, he would have heard me say that I want to thank him for his time in answering number one. And while I don't agree with him, because while what he's told me doesn't convince me, I would like to move on to number two so that we can continue on with the conversation and I can continue hearing his opinions and then we can move on to the next conversation. It is so sad that he decided to wait, I believe, over an hour in the queue for that, to show that he was just so immature and so impatient that he couldn't have, what, a 10-minute conversation? That's crazy, man. Ah. What do you mean, what a liar? What a liar. If you, like I said, if you had just waited 2 seconds, I would have thanked you for sharing your thoughts for number one, and I would have moved on to number two. But you didn't want to do that. Yes, Julie, I wanted to have a conversation back and forth. This isn't a debate, and if you will watch this again, you'll see that I did this with other guests too, even the guests before this. I brought up stuff when I thought that there was something to be said or when I needed clarification on things, and you know what that guest did? He stopped, he listened, and he responded. And when he interrupted me and asked me clarifying questions, you know what I did? I stopped, I listened, and responded. That's all that matters, is that we stop, we listen, we respond when the other person needs clarification. It doesn't matter if someone interrupts. I'm all for interrupting, as long as that interrupting is going to be beneficial to the conversation. When someone comes up and say, oh, you interrupted and I don't care what for, how fucking dare you? That's someone who's not here to engage in good faith with. And I'm sorry. Darth Dawkins is welcome to come back any other time when he's willing to engage in good faith conversation. All right, let's see if Kareem gets into the queue here. Cook, I wonder why as well. I wonder why. I don't know if he's here. Oh, he is here. Hey, look. I wish him all the best, but like I told him in DMs, I think we're done with the slavery conversation. I'm open to talk to him on other conversations and other topics, but I think we're just being a dead horse when it comes to that. So I don't think Kareem is going to load in, so. Hey, Biblical Scholar, how are you? Let's see what we got here. I know this has been making its way around lately. All right, if you are interested in these kind of conversations, if you're a believer, if you are someone who likes having these kind of conversations, or you know someone who does, go ahead and like the live, share the live to them. Let's see if we can have another conversation going up. I didn't bring up slavery, lol, nor did I say that in the chat. Bro, all you do is you send me videos or things about slavery, and I'm done with it, man. I don't talk to you unless you send me shit in the DMs, and it's always about something slavery related. Like, it's crazy how obsessed you are with me and the slavery topic. All right, the Bible. God allows slavery in his law. if you disagree, let's talk. I never end up a video on slavery. What? I don't even know what that means. But don't lie, man. If you're not afraid, we can literally screen record what our what our DMs is like, and all it'll show is months of us not talking, weeks of us not talking, and then you sending me a video and me responding to the video and you getting angry about it. So chill out. Slavery apologists are yeah, honestly. People who say that slavery is not allowed in the Bible are clearly just not paying attention to what the Bible says. They're not being honest about it. They're not being truthful. Blocking is like evaporating someone's entire existence. Yeah, no, man, I'm not lying, but go ahead and keep saying that if it makes you feel better. So yeah, if you believe that the Bible does not allow for slavery, go ahead and send in a request. Let's talk about it. If you think that it's justified that the biblical God allowed slavery, go ahead and send in a request. Would love to talk to you as well. I'd like to hear your position and why. Thank you everyone for the likes and shares. For all of you that don't know, I do have a YouTube, so if you guys would care to give me a share on there, The Atheistic Preacher, it's my handle on here, Atheistic Preacher, but just the in front of it, it'll be on YouTube. I only got a couple subscribers right now, but I recently just really started putting stuff up on there, so I really hope that people will go ahead and follow that, because if we do lose TikTok here in the next month or so, I'd like to keep in contact with some of you guys, as well as be able to create new content for people that enjoy what I'm doing now, so. Alright, we got a guest loading in. Hello, No Degree. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. Are you a Christian?
I was. Yes.
Awesome. And how long have you been a Christian for?
Since I was 19, and I'm 49 now.
All right, awesome. So a solid amount of
So a long
time, right?
time. Yep.
Yeah, I got you. And what are your thoughts on the background here?
Well, let's see. The Bible. Yeah, I would agree that the Bible allows for slavery. I wouldn't have a disagreement with that, but I would say that I don't believe it's endorsing slavery. I don't believe it's endorsing chattel slavery, and I think what it was allowing for is morally justified.
Okay, so what do you think that it was allowing for, and why do you think it was morally justified?
I think it was mainly just there's a couple of things. I think it was this war type slavery where you have God basically establishing the Israelites in a nation in a society that was paganistic, anti-God, full of evil, and under that situation, it's a different situation than maybe what we would be living in today. So there would be some things that would be necessary to be done that might not be necessary as much today. So I don't think it was making an endorsement that slavery is a good thing or anything like that. I think God was just doing this in a specific time in a specific place. I don't think we can read the Bible today and say, oh, yeah, you know what? We, living in modern America, could take a slave, or practice chattel slavery and stuff, and God be okay with it.
So I partially agree with you. At the end, I think that what you can do is you can read the Bible and say that if you live in a society where slavery is allowed, you are allowed to have a slave given your belief in the Christian God. The reason why is because you are to submit to the law of the land, given that that law doesn't go against the law of God. The law of God does allow you to have slaves, but it also tells you to obey the law of the land. If the law of the land does not allow for slavery, like the United States does, you can't just go to the store and buy a slave. But if you're somewhere else in the world which does allow for it, you are perfectly fine to. There are many instances in the Bible that talk about how you ought to treat your slave if you have them, and then how if you find yourself as a slave and you are a believer, how you ought to act. The Bible never gives any indication in both Old and New Testament that slavery is not okay or should not be done. It's simply saying how you should act if you find yourself partaking in it, whether as a master or as an owner, and whether or not the laws of your land allow it.
Well, there are certain things that obviously it does say cannot be done. That certain forms of slavery do allow, like kidnapping someone and keeping them or selling them.
Well, even that's
stealing,
kind of a little bit subjective, right?
That's not allowed.
Wouldn't that be a little bit subjective, though? So, for example, in the Bible, it says that, I agree with you that you can't kidnap anybody, right, and make them a slave, and if you are found with them in your hand, you ought to be put to death, right?
Yes.
Okay. What about other instances where we see that the Israelites could go into a place, take it over, and among the prisoners of war, see a woman that they like, take them from their homeland to the Israelites' homeland, strip them of their culture and identity, and then after a month go in and make them quote-unquote their wife? I see that as kidnapping, but it seems subjectively under this rule and under this perspective, it's not kidnapping, because once they took over this place and had prisoners of war, those prisoners of war were their property to do with as they wanted. I see that as kidnapping, though, because it is an individual human being. Do you see where my confusion is?
Well, I mean, yeah, I would agree. Like I said, in booty or stuff given in war, then, there is this idea that a person could take a woman, make him his wife, things like that. But it also says you can't sell them.
But would you not see that as kidnapping?
No, because I don't think that it's not like they're just out there. Like I said, God is dealing with these nations around Israel that had already demonstrated time and time again to be terribly evil nations. And I think that was kind of a form of punishment for the nation. And also, you could even look at it as a way to actually still allow for the women to be brought into the culture without having to be unalived.
So you think that this was a good thing for women to be converted into the nation, but also as punishment for the old nation for their horrible sins?
Well, I think it was a morally justified thing. If you're saying good in the sense that it is the only alternative or even the best alternative, but I think it was a morally justified alternative during the situation. If you hold to something kind of like a moral command type theory, not divine command, but kind of a moral command theory, where we have these things like the Ten Commandments and things that we generally this is how we live our daily lives. But there are certain circumstances, such if evil dictator and evil nation rise up and does extreme things, in which God might tell them to do this, and this, X, Y, and Z, that in normal circumstances would not be allowed. And I think that's kind of what was going on during that time period.
So let me see if I can try to put this in a little bit more clear perspective, at least from my thought, is that if we have, the land of A, A land, and the people of A land think that the land of B is supposed to belong to them, but the land of B is populated. So they go into the land of B and they take over certain places and they slaughter them all and they take over so that they can take the space. Now, let's say all along the areas of B, so C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, whatever, those people, those lands, they go over to them, and if they want to, they make war with them, and if they take over them, they take slaves. And what I don't understand, at least for me, this is clearly kidnapping if someone from the land of A who took over B and is now infiltrating, let's say, F, taking a woman from F and bringing her to land B. I don't understand how that's not kidnapping.
Well, what I'm saying here is you have this Exodus 21:16 that says, if anyone stealeth a man and keeps him or sells him as a slave, he must be unalived. Capital punishment. But there could be a situation in which you have a group of, neo supremacists who have come into a land and who have basically enforced their views and things like this, and maybe generation after generation, and then God says, okay, 400 years of this, enough is enough, and he does allow these things during that situation.
So you're saying
but it's not like something that a Christian could say today, hey, look, see, I got justification because of this. Well, that was a specific time, specific place before Christ, before the new covenant, in which God was judging a lot of nations and using Israel in some cases as the tool for punishment.
So you're saying that when it comes to the quote-unquote people that are doing things wrong and they've received, warning time and time again, that, it makes sense that the judgment be given to them. But you're also saying that judgment on the virgin kids of the neo-Nazis is justified to kidnap them and put them in places of where they're going to be sexually assaulted by men.
Well, I don't think the Bible is teaching that they would to do that to them.
Well,
I mean, I think
that's what it's talking about. It's given the permission for Hebrew men to take female POWs to their homeland. So taking them from their homeland and bringing them to the Jewish men's homeland, and then isolating them for a month while they strip them of their culture and identity by cutting their hair and cutting their nails.
Which would have been considered a good thing.
I don't know how that's considered a good thing.
Because their cultural identity was tied up in human sacrifice, bestiality, evil things that the Bible said was so bad that the land would vomit them out.
Okay,
so,
not like Israel wasn't tied up in child sacrifice either.
Well, they got tied up in that because they actually refused to follow through in some cases and unalive everyone there.
Well, I mean,
and they became when
God says off the children, is that not a child sacrifice to God?
Well, I mean, I don't know what you mean. If it depends on how you defend, say, child sacrifice, but it's not like
when you're offering that child to appease or do the bidding of your God.
Well, I don't think it's really, when you say appeasing, meaning that God is satisfied with this.
Or doing the bidding of your God. And so when God says, off this child, and you do it, you are doing the bidding of your God. I'm saying both things are things. So both things qualify and sacrifice to God for me.
And that would be good.
So you think that when the Hebrew God said, sacrifice these children to me by offering them, you think that's a good thing?
When he says, when you go into a town, unalive everything there, do not leave anything, then sure, I think what God is commanding there is a morally just, good thing to do.
Even if it means offing children?
According to Scripture, because
even,
they did not
even if
follow
it means
through.
offing children, yes or no?
In that case, yes.
Okay. Why? Why specifically when it means offing infants and children?
Well, look, I don't know the full answer to that. We can kind of maybe speculate some, but the Bible doesn't really tell us why specifically God is telling them to off the children. There's people that have offered views on this, And but the Bible doesn't really tell us. The point is,
Don't you
God
think
had
that's a
already.
problem if you're going to believe that this God is good and
No, I don't
just?
think it is. Because if you think of it like this, when God is telling them to do this, they have the background information that God has been trustworthy and reliable time and time again. He brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery.
Well,
He
he's also the one that
delivered
allowed
them.
them to go into it, so I don't see
He,
how that means he's trustworthy and
well, he brought
reliable.
them in.
It just means that you're as subject to his will.
Well, no, he brought them in there to save them, used Joseph to save them, but then, new Pharaoh arose who had forgot about Joseph and
Sure.
started
Why
oppressing them
why
and
didn't God
mistreating
warn
them.
them to leave before the new Pharaoh rose to power and enslave them? Why didn't God make it so that, oh, for the preservation of my people, I'm going to send them to Egypt via Joseph so that they can be saved, but not for the preservation of my people am I going to send them out of Egypt because they're going to be enslaved if they
Well,
stay.
he
It
did
it
send them
seems
out of
very
Egypt.
contradictory in the
Well,
logic.
there's no contradiction.
For me, it makes
There's
God
no
seem
P and
either
not P in
stupid
that.
or it makes him seem like he's illogical in his planning.
There's no contradiction, so you can't say it's illogical. You might not like what he did, but there's no P and not P in anything you
No,
just said.
I don't like it because it doesn't make any sense. I
Okay,
don't
but
understand how you
if
can be
just because
consistent
you
in that.
don't like it doesn't mean that it's not true, right?
No, I understand that, but I'm saying that
Okay.
it's not consistent. I don't like it because it's not consistent, not that it's quote unquote not
Well,
true.
do you think there could be any situation in any society in which it might be necessary to do such a thing?
To have slaves?
No, well, I mean, yeah, you could say that, but I was talking about. Yeah, let's
Not
go with
not
that.
not
Is
not
there
not if you
is
are
there any?
perfect and just God giving commands. No.
Well, if you're allowing people to have actually morally sufficient freedom, then doesn't that change things?
Oh, I don't believe the Bible allows for free will, especially morally.
Okay, so you just think God is just orchestrating everything.
Yes, according to the
So
Bible.
everybody's just puppets on a string, right?
Yes, according to Ephesians
So
5
then
and Romans 9.
God's not actually acting wrong in any kind of way, right? Because if you hold to that position,
No, I
then
think that you can definitely
there's
say
no
that what God is doing is wrong. You just
no
can't do anything to
because what
stop
you
it.
do is when you say that when you say that we're just puppets on a string and God we're just chess pieces on a board, then the only thing you could say is, well, this seems immoral, but technically everything's just amoral at that point. Morality is
No,
meaningless
I
at
could
that
say
point.
it's
Wouldn't you agree?
immoral. The only problem is that I can't say that we can do anything to stop what we're at the mercy at. It doesn't
So you
matter
couldn't
if
say it's
it's
immoral.
immoral or not. If God wants to do it, God will do it. That's all
What
that
I'm
matters.
saying is
That's
you
all that.
can't
That's
even
all that
say
it
it's
is.
immoral. Yeah, you couldn't
Yeah,
even say
yes, I
it's immoral
can.
at that point. No, you can't.
Yeah,
Because
yes, I can
what you
because
would
morality is
okay.
subjective.
Well, let me explain to you, or ask you something. If do you think that the people who hated God, who didn't want anything to do with him, that God wiped out, do you think that they would have ever changed their mind, freely changed their mind?
I don't know.
Well, the answer would be no, because you just got through saying that there's no free will. So if there's no
Oh
free
no,
will,
no, no,
then
no!
yeah,
From a biblical perspective, then yes, you're correct. No,
yeah.
God
So
will
that
create those
means
for good, and God will create those for destruction, and those that He created for
yeah,
destruction will face destruction.
and those he
Absolutely.
created for destruction have the mentality for destruction. So they
Yeah,
don't
they don't have
want
the
to be
choice.
changed. Yeah, they don't want to be. They're created to not want anything to do with God, to hate God, right?
Yes,
So
yeah, that's the
God
thing.
is
That
simply
God
giving
created
them
them.
essentially what he created them to do. So therefore,
Yeah.
he's not doing wrong by them, right?
Actually, I would say that He is doing wrong by them if He makes them
But you
sentient and
can't.
aware. If He makes
Yeah,
them
well, see,
sentient and
that's the
aware.
thing.
If He
You
doesn't, then no.
No, you can say he's making them sentient and aware,
Then yes, I would say He's doing
that they
something
don't
wrong.
want it, that they don't
If
want anything
if
to
I
do
made
with God,
something
right?
alive and aware, then it would be wrong if I started doing something doing things to them that violated them. But if I made a Sims or an
You're not
NPC that
violating
has nothing going on and has no sense of awareness or has any conscience, then yes, I can do whatever I want to them because they're not real. So if God wanted to make a bunch of
You're not
things
violating anything.
that just wanted to worship him and didn't have to go through this stuff, then fine. Even if he wanted to torture some beings because some did good things and some did bad things, that's fine. But he decided to take the extra step in making us sentient and making us aware. So now we have to deal with this weird struggle of, is it true and how do we know? And is it just if we're punished if we make the wrong decision and if we aren't aware of the things that we need to do and get all the right information that we need to get in order to make said decision? I think all of this is very important.
All of that is completely irrelevant.
I think all of it is incredibly important.
Because if it's the case that God created you a sentient being who is going to spend your life wanting nothing to do with God and hating God, then God's not doing anything wrong. Who would prefer God destroy you rather than you turn and worship God? Then God's not doing you anything, not doing you wrong, right?
And that is perfectly fine, but God decided to take the extra step in making us aware and unable to change anything. He put us in this constant state of limbo torture.
Not doing anything wrong.
No, honestly, it does. If he didn't take that extra step, because if he didn't take that extra step, then it would have been fine. If he didn't take that extra step, it would have been fine. But because he did, and he decided to make the thing aware and conscious, then that is the issue.
Well, I don't hold to this position.
It's like how, like imagine if Elon Musk makes those Tesla bots and they're able to actually operate on themselves. Would we actually take someone to court because they punched one of those in the face? I don't think we would, because we don't recognize that thing as aware, as human, as perspective of understanding what's going on, as conscious, or anything of the sorts. But if we see that person punch another individual, and we do recognize that person has conscious and individualism and all that stuff, then we would say that that is something that should be taken to court because someone's rights were violated.
Okay, let's use the Elon Musk example. He creates two robots. One robot he creates that's going to admire him and want to be with him, all this and that. He creates another robot that wants absolutely nothing to do with him, even at the expense of their own destruction. And then Elon Musk destroys this one robot. He's not done anything wrong to that robot, right? Because he created that robot to not want anything to do with him to begin with. So the wrong thing would be for Elon Musk to have this robot, force this robot into some sort of position he didn't create this robot to do, right? So when you say there's no free will, let me just conclude here.
No, go
when
ahead.
You say there's no free will in the Bible here, then basically what you do is also say, well, God's not really doing anything wrong if there's no free will.
So my issue is not that Elon Musk is destroying the robot. My issue is whether Elon Musk took the extra step to make that robot aware and conscious of what was happening and experiencing the pain before he decided to annihilate the robot. If he didn't add that stuff, then I don't care what he does to the robot because it's just a piece of machinery and it's not aware of what's happening to it and it doesn't feel the pain and it doesn't feel the misery or anything like that. But if he does take that extra step,
it still wants the pain and misery over
then
evil.
That is when it becomes wrong.
But even with all that being said, even with knowing all that, it still wants the pain and misery over having a relationship with Elon. And that's what I'm saying. If you're saying that there's no
it's not that
will,
it
then
wants
what you're
to.
saying they still don't.
What if it's unaware of Elon? What if it doesn't know if Elon's around to have a relationship with?
Well, we're saying that he does because in the Bible they do know this.
Okay, but we know in reality that's not 100% the fact.
They're aware of the God of Israel. In fact, they're so aware of him that even foreigners want to be part of that nation.
Oh, foreigners were
Uriah the Hittites.
Well, the Hebrews and foreigners were very alike in their polyistic views. They recognized not only their gods but other gods to be realistic. So of course it
For
makes sense
sure.
that foreigners would recognize the God of Israel as the people of Israel would recognize the gods of other places. That's why
And they
they had
recognize
such
him as the
laws as
most
do not
powerful.
have
Yeah.
idols and stuff like that, because you can't make descriptions of other gods and worship them and stuff. But we also see other examples in the Bible where God does battle against other gods and even sometimes loses to them. So we know that there are other gods and
I'm
that
not
they,
sure
as Hebrew
what you're
Israelites.
referring to there.
Yeah, so there's a passage I believe in First Kings, and if you want I can send you in DMs the exact reference later. But in I believe in First Kings or Second Kings, there's a passage where the people of Israel make war with a different people, and they're winning, and the enemies of Israel don't know what to do. So the king of the enemies of Israel sacrifices his firstborn son to their god Chemosh. And once they sacrifice the firstborn son, they overpower Israel and drive them back. And it talks about a giant wrath being brought down on the people of Israel. It acknowledges the active power of other gods.
Well, that just seems to be just another one of the stories where God allowed Israel to lose a battle because they weren't fully seeking Him.
No, it talks about how God was unable to basically assist them because of the iron
Well, I
chariots
know
that
it
they had.
doesn't. Oh, yeah, you're talking about that's Judges, but what atheists fail to realize here is actually God does defeat them, and He uses a woman to defeat the iron chariots. Deborah. That's just a few
Well,
chapters
actually,
later.
yeah,
Actually
that's
they're
later. We're not talking
that's
about that
because
specific battle.
yeah.
You're
But what I'm
talking
saying
about the
is that
war.
the Israelites, the Hebrews were afraid of they were the ones
Hmm?
intimidated by it, and they didn't put their faith in God. But later on, God uses an unlikely hero, a woman judge, and they go and just ransack these iron chariots. These iron chariots are nothing to God.
No, but
But He's not
what
going to
you're
allow
talking about is the
He's
loss of
not
a
going to allow
what
somebody
you're
to
talking about is the win of a
win,
what was the win of a
if they
war,
don't
and
trust
I'm
God.
talking about the loss of a battle. But I do know the story you're talking about, and I would say that the win doesn't go to Deborah. I would say it goes to Joel or Joel
Well,
or
sure,
whatever
it
her
was
name
two
is.
women there. Two women there. They destroyed a army of iron chariots. Wouldn't you agree?
No,
Because they put their faith in
no,
God.
Joel
Or that's what the Bible
Joel
teaches there.
executed the general of the opposition force
Well, what I'm saying is
while
that
she was giving him shelter in his home. She
they
didn't
were
defeat any
battling but they
chariots.
were battling the iron chariots.
No,
These
I
people had
understand what
iron
you're
chariots, and
talking
they
about,
ransacked it.
but I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
clarify that the women didn't overcome any chariots.
Well, sure, you could. I mean, I'm just saying that a woman was actually was the judge who led them to the victory where they, you know, proved here that the iron chariots
Uh,
are not a problem for God.
a woman was a judge, but a man was the general, but there was a woman who
Okay.
did
Well,
the executing of the general of the
and
opposition
and
force.
Deborah did say that a woman would be considered the hero here or something. She's saying, and it was that woman who
Yeah,
killed the general
it was seen
in
as
the
a
tent. The guy in
punishment
the
to the
tent
man because how disgraceful
to make him
that.
look bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it was seen as disgraceful that a woman get the victory versus the man. It was seen as
Well,
taunting because
it kind of is
a woman beat
emasculating, don't you
you.
think?
Yes, it was seen as emasculating, which I think is absolutely horrendous. To say that a woman is unable to do such a great thing in a war, that we have to play down men, that when women do something good, I think that that's stupid. I think
Well,
that
we do
that's
that
absolutely
today.
ridiculous.
Yeah, but we do that today. We still
Yeah,
have
and it's stupid.
these. Okay,
Don't you
well,
think
look.
it's
I mean,
stupid
this is just
when
just just.
when don't you
No,
think
I
it's
think it's
stupid to
just
make fun of
intuitive.
women and make fun of men because
I
women
don't
can
think
do
you.
things just as
I don't
physically
think you make.
combative
I
as
don't.
men?
Well, they couldn't do that. That's for sure.
But
You
but
might
don't
have
but
one.
don't you
You
think
might
it's
have
stupid?
one woman who might be better than a lot of men, but generally speaking, most men are out going to do women any day in war. It's not even a contest.
But I
They're
don't
just
understand how
physically
that's.
stronger.
But
Okay.
I don't understand why that means that you can make fun or why that should
Well,
be a punishment.
I don't think it's making fun. I think it's just they're just
Because
acknowledging.
I think for God to make a very specific punishment where I'm going to degrade you by giving a woman the glory of winning a battle, I think that that's not good. I don't think that that puts up women.
But that's
I
kind
think that
of
all that does is demean men to the point where they're lower than cattle because that's how the Bible sees women.
I don't think the Bible sees it just sees women with different roles than men.
Yeah, subservient
And
roles where they don't have a say
and
over their own bodies or their own rights.
well, I mean, I don't think the Bible teaches that man has, if he's married, has authority over his own body either without consent of the woman.
Well, a man doesn't have any death penalty, instances if he's not a virgin on his wedding night, but the woman does. A man doesn't have to prove that he's a virgin, but a woman does. A man doesn't have any price on his virginity or his purity, but a woman
Just
does.
don't think that's
A
a good
man isn't
argument.
seen as valued by his virginity as a woman does. A man is seen
I
to be
wouldn't
able to take
necessarily
as
disagree
multiple
there,
wives, whereas a woman can only
but I
have
just
one
don't think
wife
it's a good
because
argument.
she is the property of the man, versus a man can have as many women as he can afford. So I think that there's a
Well,
lot
no,
of difference
actually,
between the
actually,
value
the
of a
Bible
man and a woman.
says the Bible actually does say to a king not to multiply many wives. So it doesn't really think that
But
having a bunch of wives
but
is
the
a good
law
thing.
that God gives to his people
Well, hold
allows
on.
for men to have multiple wives.
Well, what I'm saying is there's also a specific passage that says kings should not multiply wives or not increase wives. So in that certain situation, poor people didn't really have multiple wives. They couldn't afford that. It was just kind of a status type thing to have a lot of wives. So, but what I'm saying here is this argument that it's like you're drawing a distinction here, but even women today and men have different views. And I could give you some examples too. So I think the Bible is just dealing with how men and women actually generally think. Because I was listening one time to, I believe it was Jordan Peterson or someone talking about a study that they had done, in which what they did was they conducted a study in which I don't know what group done this study, but what they did was they took a group of women, a poll, and they said, okay, you have a choice to marry either a man who's a successful lawyer, makes lots of money, but he's bodied over 100 women, or a virgin man who's about early 20s, and he hasn't established himself yet. And they asked these women, which one would you prefer to be your husband? Every one of them said the 40-year-old lawyer who had bodied over 100 women. Then they asked the exact same question to men. So you have a 40-year-old woman who's a successful lawyer, makes lots of money, but she's bodied over 100 men. Or you have one single 22, 23-year-old woman who's a virgin who isn't really doesn't make a lot of money and stuff. Which one would the man choose to be his wife? Without question, everyone, the man chose the virgin. They didn't care about the money
Why?
or the status or
Why
influence.
though? Why? Why would all men choose a virgin?
Because I think that the men view themselves as the provider and they don't want a woman who's going to
What does a virgin have to
sleep
do with
around.
that?
Well, I think it's because
What does a virgin have to do with that? I don't get that.
Because they don't want a woman who sleeps around and is just promiscuous. But
What does that have to do with being a provider, though?
Well, I think there's two things there. First of all, they consider themselves as the provider, and secondly, they don't want a woman who sleeps around.
I don't know how just because a woman has multiple bodies that means that she thinks she's the provider.
But that's actually irrelevant to my point. My point
is
women.
You brought it up. I think
men,
that's very relevant to your point. I don't.
Okay, well,
I don't understand how women having multiple bodies means that you as a man are not the provider.
Because they're untrustworthy. Any man would think a woman who bodied over.
Why are they untrustworthy?
I wouldn't trust one.
Why are they untrustworthy? Don't you think that that's just bias on your part?
No. I think it's facts.
I think it depends on why they have multiple bodies, don't you?
Yeah, I think that they just want to sleep around.
Okay, so let's say you and I both find this woman. Let's say her name is Maya. She has 31 bodies. Okay, 31 men have been inside of her. All right. Mm-hmm. Now, you and I are wondering on whether or not we're going to go on another date with her. She tells us that she has 31 bodies. Is that too much for you?
I would probably maybe still go out on a date with her just simply for being nice, but after that, I wouldn't want to see her again. Yes, that'd be too much for me.
Okay. Okay. And so What if we went on the second date with her and we found out she said that the
I
only
wouldn't go on
reason
a
why?
second date.
Okay,
If I
so
knew that.
let's say 6 months down the road you find out through a mutual friend that the reason why she has 31 bodies is because there was a time when she was 17 to 19 years old. She was kidnapped and taken into sex trafficking. And this is how many times she's been abused. But she has only been in 2 serious long-term relationships, and that she's looking for a serious long-term relationship because she wants to find someone that she can spend forever with. For me, I would see that as completely understandable, and I wouldn't care how many quote-unquote men have been inside of her,
Sure,
or
I
how many
could. I could
quote-unquote
say I would
bodies she
agree with
had.
that. Yeah,
I would be like, I understand
I would
that
agree with
whatever
that.
happened to you, it doesn't matter because it's fine. I would also
Well, I
understand
mean,
that. I would also
well, hold on,
understand that.
just you are going to have some. There is going to be some things you're going to have to deal with the marriage under that trauma that you wouldn't had you
Absolutely.
not had that trauma. But I would agree
Absolutely.
with you that would if I knew that. But see, that would be something that I'd have to. I mean, obviously, what we're talking about here is somebody who just was sexually active because they wanted to. No,
But
I wouldn't want
no,
anything to do with
we're
that.
just talking about people who have multiple bodies. We're not talking. Now we're starting
Okay,
to
well,
get
there are
into
some.
how
Yeah,
they obtain
there
those
are some
bodies.
exceptions to the rule. I would agree.
So,
Yeah.
but here's the thing: do you think that you won't even understand that if you don't get to the second date? If you're not willing to let yourself be compassionate enough to understand where they're coming from, to where they would trust you enough to tell you that, then how can you say that you're a good enough and a standard enough of a man to be worthy of having a relationship with?
Well, sure. I mean, if I wouldn't disagree, like if I found out that situation, that would be a different situation than her just willy nilly sleeping around. And
Yes,
once I,
but do you
I
understand what
think,
I'm
I
saying? That
think,
you have to earn that trust.
yeah, but I actually think that women should be a little bit more honest up front so the man doesn't waste so much time with the woman and then finds out that later.
Okay, do you think the same vice
Yeah.
versa? Do you think the man should be upfront with
Sure.
the woman?
I think the man should say, "Hey, look, I've slept around, just so you know. I don't think they should hide anything. If they
Do
think it's
you
okay, then they should be
do
willing
you
to talk
think that
about it."
after a certain amount of bodies, the man should just stop dating? Like, do you think that if I, as a man, have slept with 35 women, that I should
Yeah,
just stop dating?
I think the man shouldn't sleep with 35 women. The first one he sleeps with, he should marry and never sleep with anyone else.
Why?
Because I believe in that marriage is only reserved to, or sex is only reserved to marriage,
Why?
based off of what I conclude by reading scripture.
Yeah, but what? Even the scripture version. Why? Why does it matter? Why do you need marriage to have sex?
Because this is what God wants. This is what God established.
And why does that matter? Who cares what God wants? Why should we? But why should we follow it?
Because I love God.
Okay, if you love
I love
God,
God.
if you
more
love
than I
God and
love
you believe
people.
that this is what God wants, then you follow it. But who cares what other people do?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, and if that woman wants to sleep around, I don't want to marry her.
Okay,
I want a
awesome.
woman who would be in agreement with me, who
Okay,
has the
awesome. So
same,
so
yeah,
you're advocating for more of a I want to find someone who shares my values and that's it. You're not advocating for a everyone must follow my values.
No, I'm not
Correct?
saying they should, but
Okay.
what I think is I don't think women who have slept around with 50 people should think that they should expect the same value of a woman who's not done that. You know, you
So
I don't I like if a woman shouldn't like if she there's a guy she really likes and she's had sex with 35 men and this guy is deciding between her and a woman who hasn't had sex with anyone and he chooses the woman who's not been promiscuous and slept around, then I don't think she needs to whine and say, "Oh, this is terrible. This is an injustice." No, you if you do that, there's certain consequences you have to be prepared for.
I 100% agree that if
Yeah.
people that people should be allowed to pursue partners and individuals that share their values. I 100% agree with that. If you believe that you should only share that kind of intimacy with someone you're married to, then I think that you should be able to find somebody that also shares that same moral value. I think that you should have every right to be happy together. But I don't think that that in any way means that we should look as a society as, less devaluing of another individual just because they slept with more people,
Well, what I think is when men get called chauvinist or creeps or something because they want a woman who hasn't slept around, which often is the case, and then claim there's a double standard, as if the women really care about the double standard. And what I have found is the women don't really care about the double standard. In fact, women are often more, I don't know if I went out, but women are often more attracted to men who are players because they think, oh, look, this is, he's the one everybody wants. And man, I want to land him and get him over all the other women. So, but I don't think men think that way. I mean, they see a woman
you know
who's
what? I'm so
slept
sorry, no
around. They're
degree. I'm
not.
sorry, no degree. Give me 1 second. Just give me 1 second. My dog got something that he shouldn't have. Give me 1 second.
Bad dog. Bad dog. But I think today, I think it's when you look at these stats and how women answer these questions and how men answer these questions, to me, what that shows is the Bible is just dealing with the mentality of how women think and how men think.
My
But
apologies.
often,
I'm back.
okay. Yeah, what I
Anyway,
was just saying is,
you were saying.
I was just saying that I think when we read the Bible and say, oh, look, these women, they got to be a virgin, blah, 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 how terrible is that? It's a different standard. But even in society today, women have different standards and just their ideas than men do. They think differently. And I think the Bible is just dealing with how women and men actually think. And I don't think the Bible is specifically showing favorites. Women seem to not really be concerned with how many partners a man has slept with, generally speaking. I'm sure there's some that have, but the funny thing is, I've actually asked this exact same question. There's on that poll in other groups like the Clubhouse app to women and Discord. And every one of them actually said they agreed they would prefer the man who had bodied over 100 women who was wealthy because they were looking at a provider who could provide them security. The man is not really thinking that way. So women and men just think differently. And I think the Bible is just dealing with the way men and women think differently. It's not trying to be sexist or put a woman down over a man like is often the claim. It's just dealing with the facts of the matter and saying, hey, a woman, she's going to choose a king. And even if the king, there's another one here. Sorry for rambling on, but there's another question they ask the women. Would you rather be the wife of a peasant or the side chick of a king? And without question, the vast majority of women said they'd rather be the side chick of a king than the wife of a peasant.
So here's the thing, no degree. Pretend for 2 seconds that you're a woman. Ask yourself that question, because that's what I just did, and I chose the opposite. I chose that I would rather be the wife to a peasant. What would you choose if you were a woman? What would you choose?
Well, obviously you're going to have to ask me to think like a woman, and I can't do that.
No, I think you can't. Are you saying that you're incapable of empathy?
No, I'm saying that
are you saying that you're incapable of empathizing with a single mom?
No, what I'm saying is if I were a woman, I would say most likely I'd prefer to be the side chick of a king. But I'm not a woman, so obviously I'm going to say I'd prefer to be married to the peasant. but that's because I'm not a woman.
I don't think that that's the case. I think that
Because there's
you are
biological
100%
differences.
capable of putting yourself in the position that if you're a woman and your options were limited and your choices were be the side piece of a king or the wife to a peasant, what would you choose? My choice is to be the wife of a peasant. I wouldn't have
Okay.
no issue working on like a farm or whatever, providing for my family how the best I could, while working alongside of my husband the best that he could to provide for our family. I think that that's
Okay.
perfectly fine, and I think that that would be a lot better than being the side piece of some king who doesn't care about me, who doesn't care about what sons or children I bore him, as long as it benefited him. I think that that's
Well,
kind
look, I
of
think you would
bullshit to
just
think
be in
that
the
if you think
minority.
that, oh, just because I'm a man, I am incapable of putting myself in those shoes of a woman. And, you
Yeah,
know,
I
like,
don't think we are capable of doing that. We may
I
think we
think we
are,
are.
but
I think we are.
I think that
I think to say that we aren't is just an
regardless, you would
excuse to
be
not do it.
regardless, you would be in the vast minority who would answer that question that way, yeah, whether you're actually doing it or not. That's
Okay,
what I'm saying.
so I would say that I would rather be the wife to a peasant, and you would say you'd rather be the side piece to a king. Why would you
Well,
rather
no,
be the side
I'm
piece to a
saying
king?
that's how I would answer if I were a woman. Probably, I'd
Yeah,
rather be
yeah.
the side piece of the king. Yeah,
That's what I'm talking about. Why
yeah.
would you rather be the side piece to a king than a wife to a
Because what
peasant?
they're looking for is security and some sort of where they feel secure.
So you're saying that back then when there were kings
Women
that
will
all
choose.
women would throw themselves to a king no matter what?
No, I'm not saying all women would.
That
I'm saying
it sounds like
the
that's what you
vast
are.
majority would. Yeah, yeah.
I don't believe so. Like
Well, look, I'm just saying
Bathsheba did
these are
not throw
what.
herself to David. David pursued her. David used her. David, I would say, sexually assaulted her. There is
Okay,
nowhere
well,
where Bathsheba gives her consent,
maybe that's the
or pursues
case.
David, or even shows any interest towards David. But we are somehow supposed to accept that this is an affair instead of just him
Well,
assaulting
I
her.
mean, I think you can kind of assume that because she did marry David later after
I don't
Uriah.
understand. Yeah, but I don't
Yeah,
understand how if you are a
you think she
king.
was forced against that?
Yes, I think that if you're a king
Hmm.
and if you choose a commoner to be your spouse, then you can choose for that to happen, whether or not the consent of the spouse is
So
done.
you just think, even though there's no indication in the Bible, you're getting it from outside information
Can you
that
show
she
me
didn't have any
anywhere
choice.
in the Bible where she gives her consent or gives any kind of interest towards David at all?
Yeah,
Any
I mean
interest?
the fact that he laid
Where?
with her, it
No, no,
doesn't
no, no, no.
say.
That
Yeah, you
that that
don't.
doesn't.
Wait, the
No, that doesn't
passage
mean that
doesn't.
she was
Well,
interested
hold
in
on.
him.
The passage doesn't use the word uh, "great." It
No,
uses he laid.
no,
Knew
of
her.
course it
Yeah,
doesn't. Yeah,
yeah.
and you know
But
what?
it does use that in other
When it
passages,
talks
though.
about the prince that raped Tamar, or not, I'm sorry, not Tamar, Jacob's daughter, Diana, it doesn't use the word rape, but you can very clearly tell from the
I'm
context
pretty
that's
sure
what's
it
happening.
does.
It does not.
Okay, well,
It
I
does
don't
not,
know.
but you can
I
tell
don't.
from the
I think
context
I
that's what's
I think
happening.
you're probably wrong there, and I could probably prove it. But I do know that the
Well,
Bible
well,
does use the. Well, hold on, let's finish. You keep interrupting
no,
me
no,
like
go,
you're
no,
going dark.
go ahead. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do find other passages where, like, when David's uh, son uh, rapes or grapes his daughter from another mother. I mean, that's clearly, and you don't find that with Bathsheba. Furthermore, Bathsheba marries him afterwards, and then they have Solomon, and then
I don't know how that means she consented.
she actively participates in this role. So what I'm saying is, and furthermore, I think the final
Where
piece
does it
of
show her
I'm almost
consent though?
the final piece of evidence is in the when it gives the line of Jesus in the New Testament, it doesn't say Bathsheba, it says Uriah's wife. And but when you're talking about someone like Ruth, who was a Moabite, her name is actually mentioned. So it doesn't have a problem mentioning women's names, but it just leaves Bathsheba's name out and you mentions Uriah's wife. So I think that that's
I
also
don't
an
know how that
indication
has
that she was
anything to do
actually.
with whether what
Well, I
happened
just
to
think that all
Bathsheba was
of that
rape or
is
not.
I think that is. I don't think you can make the case that she was raped with all of that information.
I think you can, because you can take the power level at case value. So you can see that a king asked a commoner for sex, and you can understand, like, how bad would it be to say no to a king? You realize how many common people would be very uncomfortable with saying no to a king. So while, as to put it in a modern sense, we understand what it would be like to say no to your boss when they want to have sex with you, even if it means for a promotion. So even though, even if you quote unquote choose to have sex with that boss, but even if you were just uncomfortable because they were in a position of power over you, that is still something that they could be held liable for, and something they could be fired for, as well as just responsible for, and they should be held responsible for. So if we were to say that a king, how much more of a higher standard is it when a king goes to a common woman and says, "I'm going to have sex with you"? The answer is yes, or you're going to probably get hurt.
Based on this poll I talked about, then we can probably safely assume that she did actively participate in it, because women said they'd rather be a side chick of a king than married to a peasant. So I just
I wouldn't agree with that.
I don't think anybody should ever try to argue that she did not actively participate in this.
What sources do you have? What sources do you have to say that most women would rather be the side piece of a wealthy person than the wife of a poor person?
It was a poll. I don't know where I'd have to find it again, but it was some sort of poll that was talked about in a discussion about men and women.
Sure. Why don't you find that poll for me and go ahead and DM me? I would love to take a look for that.
Well,
in the meantime, though. Yeah, no. In the meantime, though, thank you so much for your time. I do have to go because I have to go to work here in about 10 minutes, and I have to get ready for it. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time. Go ahead and DM me that information if you'd like. I'd love to take a look at it. But thank you so much for being here.
Sounds good.